Kenzie Reeves was 25 years old. She lived in a sleek high-security condo in a newly developed part of Las Vegas, a city that never slept, much like her own relentless drive. The interior was modern but sparsely decorated, a clean slate that reflected a life focused on work and forward momentum, with little room for a past she was determined to outrun. Her annual income was a formidable $900,000, a fortune built from a staggering output of films, exclusive scene bookings, a popular OnlyFans presence, and a shrewd understanding of her unique niche in the industry. She was known for her hyper-energetic performances, her tiny frame, and a seemingly boundless stamina that had earned her a reputation as a pocket rocket, a label she carried with a mix of pride and private weariness. But the woman who now commanded top dollar and immediate recognition on any set was a fortress built around a girl named Kendra, a girl whose story began not in the glamour of Vegas, but in the oppressive, God-fearing silence of a small rural town in Idaho. Kendra was the youngest of four in a family governed by the strict, unyielding principles of a conservative church. Life was a series of rules: modest dress, no secular music, and a future that was preordained. Marriage to a good man from the congregation, a house full of children, a life of quiet servitude. Her body, from a shockingly young age, felt like a sin waiting to happen. While other girls her age were gangly and awkward, Kendra developed a figure that was a direct contradiction to her environment. She was petite, barely scraping 5 feet tall, with a waist so narrow it seemed you could circle it with your hands. But this tiny waist curved into surprisingly wide hips and supported a pair of full, heavy, all-natural breasts that felt like a curse. They drew stares from the boys and judgmental, whispered prayers from the women. Her face, framed by mousy brown hair she was told to keep tied back, was dotted with freckles, and her eyes, a wide and expressive hazel, were constantly downcast, hiding a fierce intelligence and a restless spirit that the Bible studies and chores could never quite extinguish. Her escape was a secret, second-hand laptop she hid under her mattress. While her family slept, she would dive into the internet, a world so vast and chaotic it made her head spin. She discovered forums, social media, and eventually, the world of online cam models. She saw girls, some not much older than her, who were not hiding their bodies but celebrating them. They were in control. They were earning money, building lives, and they seemed free. A dangerous, thrilling idea took root. At 17, using money from a secret part-time job at a local diner, she bought a cheap webcam. She created a profile under a fake name, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. Her first stream was a disaster. Blurry, poorly lit, and she was paralyzed with fear. But the handful of viewers she had were encouraging. So tiny and cute, they typed. Love your natural tits. The validation was a drug more potent than anything she had ever known. For the first time, the very features that shamed her in her daily life were being praised. The double life was exhausting and terrifying. The guilt was a physical weight. But the money, however small at first, was a taste of independence. The breaking point came when her father found a hidden stash of cash. The confrontation was explosive, a torrent of accusations of sin and devilry. She was given an ultimatum: repent, commit to the church, and prepare for an arranged courtship, or be cast out. That night, staring at her reflection in the dark window, a freckled face and haunted hazel eyes, Kendra made a choice. She would not repent. She would not be buried alive in that town. She packed a single backpack, withdrew every dollar she had saved from her secret online work, and left a note on her pillow. She didn't say where she was going. She simply said she was choosing herself. She ended up in Portland, Oregon, a city that felt alien and liberating. She got a job as a waitress, but the money was a pittance. The fear of being found and dragged back home was a constant companion. Her online camming became her only real source of income and solace. It was there she was discovered by a talent scout for a small adult film studio. He was blunt. "You've got a look," he said over a grainy video call. "The girl next door thing, but with that banging little body. The industry is full of plastic. You're real. That's a selling point. We can offer you a flight to LA and a test shoot. $2,000. $2,000. It was more money than she had ever seen. It was also a line, far more permanent than camming. Crossing it meant there was no going back to any version of a normal life. But the normal life she knew was a prison sentence. She thought of her father's condemning eyes, the diner's greasy floors, the relentless struggle. She made the choice. She would become someone new entirely. She chose the name Kenzie Reeves, Kenzie sounding modern and energetic, Reeves adding a touch of classic Hollywood flair. Her first professional shoot in a sterile San Fernando Valley studio was a brutal shock. It was nothing like the intimate control of camming. It was a production line. The director was impatient, the male co-star was physically imposing and smelled of cheap cologne. As the lights heated her skin, she felt a familiar dissociation, the same she used to feel during Sunday sermons. She retreated deep inside herself, letting Kenzie take over. She performed the required actions with a mechanical precision, her mind 1,000 miles away. But when the director yelled, "Cut," something unexpected happened. The producer, a no-nonsense woman, handed her an envelope of cash. "You're a pro," the woman said, not unkindly. "Tough kid." Kenzie walked out of the studio, the thick envelope in her purse feeling like a brick. She found a quiet corner and counted the bills. 20 crisp $100 bills. She didn't feel shame. She didn't feel turned on. She felt a cold, clean surge of power. She had taken the most forbidden part of herself and turned it into a weapon for her own survival. The scared girl from Idaho was gone. In her place was Kenzie Reeves, and she was just getting started. The first part of her journey was about escape and survival. The second would be about conquering the very world that had offered her a way out. The initial phase of Kenzie Reeves' career was a masterclass in sheer, relentless output. She said yes to everything. She became a fixture on the sets of every major studio, her tiny, freckled frame and energetic performances making her instantly recognizable. Her niche was her realness, the all-natural girl-next-door body combined with a wild, almost frantic on-screen energy that stood in stark contrast to her quiet, reserved, off-camera demeanor. Directors loved her because she was reliable, required little direction, and could complete a scene quickly and efficiently. She was a workhorse, and the industry rewarded her for it. The money, which had once been a miraculous windfall, became a predictable, ever-growing river. She moved from a shared apartment in a bad part of LA to a nice one-bedroom in Burbank, and finally, seeking anonymity and a lower cost of living, to the condo in Las Vegas. She became a student of the business. She learned which producers paid on time, which co-stars were professional, and how to negotiate her rates. She watched the digital revolution transform the industry and dove headfirst into it, building a massive following on platforms like Twitter and OnlyFans, where she could control her image and revenue directly. She was no longer just a performer for studios, she was her own CEO. The Kenzie Reeves brand was a carefully managed operation, the energetic pocket rocket for the cameras, the savvy businesswoman behind the scenes. But the duality was a chasm that grew wider with each passing year. The frantic pace was a coping mechanism, a way to outrun the ghost of Kendra. She rarely took a day off. On the rare occasions she was alone in her silent Vegas condo, the emptiness was deafening. The guilt and trauma from her past, which she had buried under a mountain of work and money, began to seep through the cracks. She started having anxiety attacks before shoots, something she had never experienced before. The bright lights and the physical demands, once a welcome distraction, now felt suffocating. She felt like she was performing her own disintegration, night after night. The breaking point was a scene she had committed to months in advance. It was a large production with multiple male co-stars, the kind of intense, high-energy work that had made her famous. But on the day of the shoot, as she sat in the makeup chair, she felt a panic so visceral it made her nauseous. The makeup artist commented on her pale complexion. In the mirror, she didn't see Kenzie Reeves, the successful adult film star. She saw Kendra, the terrified girl from Idaho, about to be punished for her sins. She felt like a fraud, an imposter in her own life. When the director called her to set, she froze. She couldn't move. The fear was paralyzing. She mumbled an apology, fled the set, and drove back to Vegas in a blind panic, ignoring the furious calls from her agent. For a week, She didn't leave her condo. She shut off her phone, ignored her emails, and let the world outside fade away. It was during this self-imposed exile that she was forced to finally look at herself. She had achieved every material goal she had set: financial freedom, independence, success in her field, and she was utterly miserable. She realized she had never stopped running. She had simply traded one prison for another, swapping the oppressive rules of her childhood for the relentless demands of the Kenzie Reeves persona. She had escaped her past, but she had never built a present for herself, only a brand. Her journey to healing was slow and difficult. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and the unique pressures of the sex industry. It was painful, agonizing work. She had to grieve for the childhood she never had, forgive herself for the choices she made to survive, and finally separate Kendra, the person, from Kenzie Reeves, the product. She began to reintroduce small pieces of her authentic self into her life. She started painting, something she had loved as a child but had been forced to abandon. She reached out, tentatively, to one of her sisters, and to her shock, found a cautious, fragile path to reconciliation. Professionally, she made a radical shift. She drastically reduced her filming schedule, being ruthlessly selective with the projects she took. She fired her old agent and hired a manager who understood and respected her new boundaries. She focused on her online platforms, where she had more control, and began to share a more curated, but genuinely more real, version of herself. She posted about her love for painting, her struggles with anxiety, her joy in the simple quiet of her Vegas home. Her fans, instead of being alienated, responded with an outpouring of support. They didn't just want the pocket rocket, they were invested in the woman they saw emerging. Now, at 25, Kenzie Reeves is in a state of careful, deliberate reconstruction. The frantic energy has been replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. The hazel eyes that once held only fear or a performative sparkle now hold a complex mixture of hard-won wisdom and a peace that is still new and fragile. She still earns a fortune, but the money is no longer the goal. It's the tool that provides her with the security and freedom to finally figure out who she is.